Welcome to the Maintainable Software Podcast, where we speak with seasoned practitioners who have helped organizations work through the problems often associated with technical debt and legacy code. I'm your host, Robby Russell. Joining us on this episode from Bucharest, Romania is Magda Miu, who is a technical trainer, speaker, and blogger. Magda is currently a squad lead developer for Orange and is a co-organizer of Women Tech Makers Romania and a number of other local groups. Magda Miu, we're so glad to have you on Maintainable.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Robby. I'm happy also to be here.
Excellent. So, as you reflect on your time in the industry, what do you believe are a few common characteristics of well-maintained software?
Yeah, I think it means that you trust your code, you trust your software, and this trust is built in time. It involves a lot of things. It's a team effort, and it means to have clean code, a readable code. It means to make sure you have a clear separation of concerns, high cohesion and loose coupling, and also you should make sure that the oriented object principles are applied, like solid or dry or KISS or YAGNI. For sure, tests are very important, and they should be run periodically, and they should be maintained. Security checks to make sure that your clients, your users, are using a safe software. Also, the unhappy paths should be covered, and everything should be put in place and have a CI/CD pipeline that will help you to make easier the releases.
Out of curiosity, what types of projects are you usually working on in terms of, are you like mobile development applications or web apps, a bit of everything?
Yeah, my background is in mobile development, especially Android development. I used to do only mobile apps at the beginning. I work as an Android developer for about 6 years. After that, I started also to have a few colleagues in my team, and I started to be like a mentor for them because I was the most senior person in the team. After that, I started to be like a team lead for them, and currently I have a cross-functional team. I have also backend developers and mobile developers. We are an entire squad. And right now we are developing two mobile apps, an Android and an iOS native apps that are exposed to the end customers. But my team also is creating the backend of these apps, and also we handle everything from UX, UI designs, prototypes. The specs are also written inside of the team. I mean, all the members of the team are involved in the entire life cycle of the project, from defining the specs until the project is launched on the market and we have marketing campaigns and so on.
Oh, wow. Nice. One of the things you said earlier about maintainable code being having trust in your code, and a lot of the things you mentioned kind of helps answer to what ways to do that. Like you mentioned, like having tests run on a regular frequency, or you mentioned some various things like solid or YAGNI. For those that aren't familiar, can you give a quick intro to that, what solid is and YAGNI?
Yes, solid, it's actually a set of principles. This set of principles are related to the way we structure our code. And the main idea is to have loose coupling and high cohesion. Cohesion means that each module or class should have only one responsibility, and it's somehow related to the first principle from solid, which is single responsibility principle. S is coming from single responsibility principle, and it means that a class or a module should have only one responsibility and only one reason to change. Other than that, the second one is open-close principle, and we need to make sure that when we write our code, we will be able to add extra features without changing the existing code and affecting the current behavior. L is coming from Liskov's substitution principle. Liskov was actually a woman, was Barbara Liskov. And it means that your behavior should not be changed even if you use the child and not the parent, and so on. So It's actually about how you structure the code. It's about using the encapsulation and making sure that you don't let other classes or models to know so much about your class. And it's also about polymorphism and make sure that you respect these principles. And the result is that your code will be easy to maintain and easy to add new features inside of it.
But you're coming from an OO world primarily, correct?
Yes, exactly.
One of the things that's I always find interesting when you talk about, having classes that are, as you say, kind of like a single responsibility. Can you give like a tangible example for folks that might not be maybe newer in their career and haven't really had a chance to, like, they're maybe working on existing projects that have a lot of code already written, but like maybe what's a good example that you might be able to help kind of frame that around?
Yeah, for example, in the Android world, but also in any other project that expose a user interface to the user, it's okay that your view to have very few code and to not have the logic, the business inside of it. So the view should be responsible only to display the UI elements, and that's it. And after that, you need to have, for example, in the Android world, we have architecture components and we have the view model. The view model is the component that will communicate with the business, with the maybe with a web server or maybe with a local database. And the view model will process the data, and that data will be displayed in the UI. So in this case, the single responsibility of the UI, of the view, is just to display the UI. And the view model will make sure that the info that is obtained from the database or from the API, it's displayed correctly and respects the business rules.
Nice. Do you use the metaphor technical debt at all?
Yeah. Right now, I'm in a very lucky context, and we start the project from the beginning, from the scratch. Usually, it happens that you get also some technical debt. And currently, our approach is to identify that debt. It's like when you have a financial debt, you need to know how big is that debt. In order to evaluate these things, the team should focus to see what are the things that should be improved. And we have like a backlog. We try to create a list of stories or tasks with those things that should be improved. We estimate them, and based on the impact and the priority, we take a few part of them in each sprint in order to also reduce the technical debt and also to deliver some real value to the users.
In your current working environment, is that something that your team's able to kind of manage themselves, or are you having to take those conversations like, hey, we've identified some technical debt, it's in our backlog, we have an estimate, are you needing to go present that to some other stakeholders that are thinking about other aspects and priorities in the business, or is that something the team feels pretty comfortable that they can just include each time and they're not needing to ask for, like, having to sell the benefit to, say, non-technical people?
Yeah, in the current context, yes, I think we have a lucky approach. Our product owners understand the importance of writing a clean code that it's maintainable, and for sure they want to us to also to deliver value to the user. But I think it's more like a negotiation, and we split it the effort in the sprint based on the priorities. And we also try to combine our priorities with their priorities. And for example, if we have a release in 2 weeks, for sure we will focus to make that release a success, and after that focus on the technical depth. But it's a continued conversation, and it's important to understand and to help the stakeholders to understand the why, and also to have a clear plan. Because if you have a clear plan and you let them know this is the list, these are our priorities, when they see that you have a plan, they will trust you, and they will understand the importance of achieving that plan.
Have you seen some examples of how software engineers try to present technical debt in a very ineffective way?
We had some challenges in this area, maybe because we were not so seniors, and maybe because we didn't know how to help the non-technical people to understand why we want to address that technical debt and actually what is this technical debt, because they need to understand also how this technical debt appeared. And usually it happens because we have deadlines, or maybe the team is made of junior people, and there are a lot of causes of this issue. Yeah, in the past it was challenging to explain these things, but it's a thing that you learn. It could be improved all the time.
What are some challenges that you've faced as a developer when encountering older existing code bases?
I think the common challenge is the absence of the tests, because if you get a project with a legacy code and you want to refactor it, it's very difficult to refactor because you don't know if you change something, if something will be broke in some part of the apps. So this is the common issue, the absence of the tests.
And that speaks, I think, to your earlier point on having trust in the code. And it's like, in some ways, having trust in your own self to make changes in something that you don't fully understand. And so it's an anxiety or just a high fear of risk, or I don't want to break things, but also needing to somehow figure out how do you push through that. So in those scenarios, do you feel like you have some good examples of where you've been able to actually start implementing some tests to build up that confidence? And what types of tests do you think are most valuable early on to introduce to, say, a legacy code base?
Yeah, I think this one is the first solution that it comes to start to write tests, and after that start to refactor the code. Unit tests for the beginning. It's also helpful to have at least some documentation, or at least the product owner that defined those specs at the beginning, to make sure that you know what you are doing there. And it's also important to understand that this review of the code, it involves a lot of time, because you spend most of the time by reading the code, and maybe you read, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours the code and debug it in order to understand what is the logic of it and what is the connection between the models or the classes. And after that you maybe write just three or 4 lines of code in order to, I don't know, fix a thing, or just to understand what's happening in order to implement your feature.
You touched on reading code versus writing code, and I think it's something that I'm hearing more about, people trying to spend more time, or at least talk about that aspect of software development, that we're spending more time reading than writing probably, but that's not like the image that we project of like what a developer or engineer is doing. Is like, oh, I'm working on just writing a bunch of code, and it's like, but there's so much time just in comprehending what's already there. How do you coach people on your team to understand how to get effective at reading and understanding code versus just jumping into to start changing code?
Yeah, I think it's also a term from Martin Fowler, comprehension refactoring, to understand the code, and as you start to understand it, to also be able to refactor it. And yes, I think in my coaching process with my team, the most important thing is to help them to understand the why it's important to change it, or to refactoring that code, or to add tests, and also to help them to learn how to ask questions, how to address questions. Because when you start to work on a feature or to solve an issue, you need to make sure that you understand what should be done. And in order to understand it, you need to address questions. So I think this is an important skill that should be developed, to be curious, to ask questions, and to understand also the importance of the code review and the pull requests. Because even if you are not so sure about what's happening there, okay, you address the questions. It's like a process, actually. You address the question to understand what's happening there. You start to read the code, start to write the code, and after that you send the pull request to your colleagues. And this is very good way to get some feedback from them, and also to help them to learn the code base and understand also that part of the project, and also improve the quality and the consistency of the code. Because I think when you are new in a team, or when you build a team from the scratch, it's important to define a set of conventions with them and make sure that everybody is aware about that set of conventions, and they are applied in our daily tasks. I understand also the importance of sharing the knowledge and understand the code base.
I think I know how you might answer this, but in terms of asking questions of your peers and the stakeholders of like what the requirements are, do you also kind of advocate for trying to think about how they're asking questions of themselves as they're looking at the code, in terms of like, how does this work, or why would someone write it, like trying to connect the pieces to get that mental model of how the application is currently working?
Yeah, indeed, it's somehow split it into two directions: external question and internal questions. And when you ask your stakeholders, or maybe your manager or your colleagues, an important thing here is to have a common language. And when you ask, I don't know, what does it mean cancel for you, you should have the same meaning for that word. And everybody should know that cancel means that, I don't know, a user doesn't want to continue with that subscription, sorry. Other than addressing the questions outside of the team, or to the stakeholders, or to your manager, for sure it's also an internal process. And from my experience, usually I prefer to take a piece of paper and just to try to make like a pseudo code and like a mental model or schema, in order to understand how the things are going inside of the code, and understand the connections and the relationships between the classes or the models.
Admittedly, I've not had a lot of guests on the podcast that work in the mobile app world. And so I was curious, do you find that there's some particularly unique challenges to building maintainable code for those types of projects, say, versus someone that's building maybe a desktop, or maybe like my world is like more web development and APIs and such? What are some unique set of challenges that you're in your facet of the industry, do you feel like you're experiencing on a regular basis?
So I work as a web developer for about half a year, I think 5 or 6 months, C#. And after that, I started to work on the Android development, because at the university I learned Java, and this was the the main criteria used by my managers to follow this switch. And yes, indeed, I like it more to code in the Android in order to build Android apps, because I had the opportunity to show how my code is creating an app. So I write some code in a tool, and that code it's packaged, and after that I'm able to see it on the device. And this was the main thing that made me to continue this my career in the Android development. In terms of challenges, yes, there are a lot of challenges, especially related to the fragmentation, because especially on Android, and lately also in the iOS development, we have a lot of devices, small devices, bigger devices, with different Android versions. And the platform is very fragmented, and your code should be done in order to work on different kind of devices. There are entry-level devices, mid-range devices, and premium devices. And you need to make sure that you have resources adapted for each type, that you handle correctly the memory, because maybe your app will run on a device that doesn't have so much memory. And I think this is the main challenge, and also the fact that each year something new is launched. And in the Android world, I'm happy that in the latest, I think 3 years, Google started to bring some guidelines for us, the developers, in terms of developing apps. until 2017, the community brought some architecture models or libraries that should be used in order to implement, I don't know, the connection to a local database, or the way to handle the architecture of an app. And right now, from my point of view, it's a good start if you want to chase this career in the Android development. It's a good moment to start to learn Android.
You're seeing that there's over the last few years, there's been an investment in, and a little bit more best practices have been kind of shared more collectively around the industry, or at least in that space of software development. I know that's always been a challenge for me with different types of. I work in the web application environment, so I work with, like, say, Ruby on Rails primarily for a really long time. And one of the things I always really liked about it was very opinionated. To be like, if you follow most of these best practices, you're going to be able to do 80-90% of what you really need to do, and you can figure out those little edge cases along the way. But that's made my life as a consultant and a software developer to be able to take over existing projects, because most projects hopefully follow in a little bit of those, embrace those conventions. And I'm always curious about another ecosystems where, like, that could be a challenge. Like, well, the previous people that worked on this project had one set of opinions, and now it's like a completely different set of opinions on this other project. And, like, okay, so you just try, like, how do you approach them all, try to build some momentum on those different opinions, I suppose. One thing I'm curious about, you mentioned how you're going through with your team on you select some stories maybe every sprint that are dealing with some technical debt. Is there an approximate percentage on average you're seeing as, like, 20% of the work that you're committing to is on improving existing stuff versus building new stuff?
Yeah, to be honest, in the current context, we just started to build a backlog. So we are still assessing the stories and try to get some extra details from the stakeholders in order to make sure that we will develop it in the right direction. But I tend to say that it will be around 10, 15%, maybe 20, depending on the priorities from the product owners.
I'll check in with you again in the future and see how that's going for you.
Yes.
So, outside of writing and maintainable and clean code and following all these principles, what other characteristics are you looking for in your team members to work collectively in a team?
Yeah, when I started to work as a team lead, and currently I'm a squad lead developer, I understood the importance of the team in order to create an awesome product. I truly believe that if you build an awesome team, that team will build some awesome products. If you are lucky enough to choose your team members, you should start from the hiring process and make sure that you know what kind of profiles are you searching for, and have a hiring process in place with some clear milestones that should be achieved by each candidate. And after that, I think it's also important to have an onboarding process, because the onboarding time, it's actually represent the first days of a new team member inside of that project, inside of that company. And you should do your best in order to make them feel comfortable and welcomed. And I think also the onboarding should start before the team member will join the team. It's important to call them before they will come at work, and let them know they are important for you and for your team and for the project. And they are welcomed in the team. And also when they start to work, you should have some checklists that should be covered in order to make sure that they know what should be done. They know what tools to install, or what software are you using in order, I don't know, to make a request for a mouse or for a keypad. And also it's very helpful to have an onboarding buddy, someone from the team that already knows all the processes and what's happening in the company, that will help the new team member to have a smooth onboarding. This is when it's applied when you hire new team members. If you already have a team, a thing that I understood lately, in the latest years, is that it's about them, it's not about me. My role is to set up them for success. and I need to create a context in order to help them to grow and to make sure that everything, or at least almost of the things, are clear. We have a clear set of objectives. And also the trust is very important. It's very difficult to build. And the honesty. Yeah, sometimes we prefer to be nice because in this way you avoid the difficult conversations. But by having this approach, your team will not be able to grow. And you could get some extra issues starting from there. And I'm still learning. I'm still doing my best to have rigorous and consistent behavior.
I can appreciate that. As you were talking about that, I'm like, oh, we're doing some of those things. And I'm like, I'm doing a really bad job at a few of those too. And I'm like, oh, I need to think about that a little bit more. I wanted to dig into this a little bit more. You mentioned the squad lead. What is, I've heard that mentioned a few times, and there's been a couple of other guests that have mentioned it. But just for those that didn't hear that episode, what is a squad lead versus like a tech lead, team lead? What is a squad? Maybe I'll start there.
Yeah, we try somehow to replicate the model from Spotify. They have this model of squads and tribes. At this moment, it's an agility process in the company that I work at, Orange, and we have different squads in our department that are handling a specific product. So a squad, it's actually a team of cross-functional people that are co-located when we work at the office and that are responsible to build a product from specs until the product goes to the end customer. And by cross-functional, I mean that we have the product owners that are coming from marketing. We have also PR people in our team. We have business analysts. We have QA, quality assurance, UX, UI designer, mobile developers, backend developers. It's an entire team of people that are working on the same objectives, and their purpose is to deliver a product to the end customer.
And to market it and promote it. So it's when you say cross-functional, it's definitely beyond just being a collection of designers, developers, project managers, QA people. You're actually working closely with the marketing.
Yeah. And this was very helpful from my perspective. It's my first time when I tried this approach. It was very helpful because we understood what's happening with our code after we commit it and release it. Because we got feedback from customers directly from the product owners. They are doing tests with the customers and they are getting their feedback from different channels. And we understand the big purpose of the project. And also they are able to understand what we are doing. Exactly what you mentioned before. We don't just write code. We have meetings, we plan some stuff, we review the code and so on. So everybody knows better what the other team members are doing, and we understand the big purpose of the project.
Do you find that type of approach has been helpful in your role? Do you ever have people on your team, like developers, I'm thinking specifically, be concerned about how many meetings they need to be part of in that space?
Yeah, indeed. Sometimes it happens to have many meetings. We try to reduce them as much as possible. And sometimes we get only one representative from the backend and from the mobile in order to not involve the entire team in a meeting that we don't know exactly if we will have some clear things to define at the end of it. Sometimes we just try to understand what should be done next or to understand some new flows. And it's just like a brainstorming or like a small talk about what should be done next, but without being so clear the purpose of it. So we try to reduce the time spent on the meetings, and because I also know that it's not so such a great thing to spend too much time on meetings, because you feel the need to achieve something during the day, not just to mention that you were in 5 meetings.
Yes. I hear you there. It's been an interesting thing I've heard from different developers, like people that I employ myself. Even like I was having a one-on-one recently with someone, and they're like, "I'm just in too many meetings," and then I'm thinking about it. And I'm like, if you weren't in some of those meetings, you'd be feeling like you were missed out on something too, and like, well, I didn't know that I wasn't in that meeting, and so there's sometimes that struggle for. How do you help your team? I'm asking for some free advice here. Understand that not everybody needs to be part of every meeting. So the people that are not part of a meeting need to trust that the person that's going into the representative. So you mentioned that there might be one person from the back end goes into there and comes. How do you help that transmission of important communication get distributed outside of the person that attended it? The other people can trust that they're going to be aware of what's important, but not necessarily feel like they need to be part of every conversation to understand why things are being decided the way they are.
Yeah, usually we have meeting notes. I'm a big fan of Confluence. And I like a lot to write documentation or to make sure that some details are added there. We have also decision logs where we write all the things that we decided in order to, when, I don't know, maybe someone will ask, why did you do that in that way? We will go there and see what was the purpose of changing that functionality. So this is one approach, to have meeting notes sent to the entire team, not only to the people that participated at that meeting. And usually they try to rotate. I mean, to not be the same person all the time in the meetings. So the knowledge will be shared in a proper way. And it's very difficult when you have one person that is somehow the subject matter expert. The sharing of the code and of the knowledge, it's important, and it should be somehow at the same level. We are not there yet with some parts of the app, but we are trying to improve this thing.
Yeah, I'm always cognizant of how there's so much information usually happening, like being shared and moving around us in our day-to-day work, and like how we can send out meeting notes to the rest of the team that wasn't, say, part of the meeting, but that doesn't always guarantee that they understand it or they've really took the time to comprehend it or even to ask questions of it. Have you found some good ways of helping know that your team has has somehow wrapped their head around it, or is it just more of a this is how we do it and like the expectation is you should read it? Is there any sort of expectation that they have to comprehend it each time?
Our approach in this case, usually when we need to make some decisions or to decide the stories for the next sprints, is to make the refinement meetings. And in that refinement meeting, everybody will participate and they will have the opportunity to address questions if something is not clear. And usually in those meetings, we reiterate the things that we know until then. And maybe if something is not clear or we discover during the meeting that something should be more detailed, the product owners and the business analysts will have some homeworks for the next meeting, and in the next refinement or planning, they will bring the results.
You mentioned also when you're talking about when you're seeking out types of people to hire on your team, and you went through that. I appreciate that you walking through the whole onboarding experience that you're striving for there. You mentioned profiles that you're seeking. Do you have some examples of what that might look like off the top of your head?
Mm-hmm. So, for example, if I'm searching for a mobile developer for my team, first of all, I look inside of my team and see how my colleagues, what kind of skills my colleagues have, what kind of skills are needed in order to collaborate with the other team members. So I think this profile usually split on three main things: the skills, the experience, and also the team matching criteria. For example, if I search for an Android developer, maybe I want a senior. Starting from there, I'm trying to build a profile that I would like to find. to check some specific skills. And based on that, I will also address the questions during the interview process. And also if they will pass that milestone, I'll go further and see what should be asked, or what kind of task they should do in order to match my profile.
Are there certain types of like the skills and such, but also are you often looking for like where there's a gap in your team skill set? Like, okay, we need to go find this in someone else versus trying to train your team to figure out how to get over there? How do you weigh that up sometimes in your hiring process?
Yeah, I believe in a mixed set of skills. I also believe in the idea of matching the people with the right place in the team. And for sure, you should have different kind of people inside of your team. Maybe one that is very curious and want to learn more stuff, and that person will be able to bring new ideas or new libraries that we will be able to use, and that will improve the quality of the code or the speed of development. And also you maybe need a person that is very good on the business and it's able to write a very well structured layer of used for connection with the API or with the database. So it's a mixed set of skills. And also, yeah, sometimes if I have some specific set of skills inside of my team, I try to bring something new.
We'll be back with our interview with Magda in just a moment. Hi, it's me, Robby. I wanted to take a quick moment to say thank you for making time to listen to Maintainable. If you're finding these discussions valuable, please consider sharing a link amongst your peers on social media like LinkedIn or Twitter, and/or writing a review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. Also, do you know someone in the industry that I should be speaking with on Maintainable? Shoot me an email to Robby with a Y at maintainable.fm. And now, back to our interview with Magda Miu. It's my understanding that outside of being a squad lead and coder yourself, you're also a trainer and mentor for other developers. How did you find your pathway into doing that type of work?
Yeah, I think actually my parents wanted me to be a teacher. And I think it's somehow their wish came true. The idea with the mentoring started from the fact that I was a co-organizer at a local community for developers. It's called Google Developers Group. And I was involved in organizing free events for the developers from my hometown. And sometimes I also enjoy to give technical presentations. And I also, when I started to write Android code, there were not so many resources, and I started to build my own blog, just like a library, like a set of resources for myself in order to search there when I forgot to do something in a proper way. So these two things combined help me to understand how helpful is to have someone that could share with you some knowledge and that could help you to move on your career and be a better developer. And as part of these communities, I also started to talk at technical conferences in Romania and also outside of country in France or Germany or Prague in Czech Republic. And the achievement, let's call it like this, was that I received a certification which is called Google Developer Expert for Android. Based on that, I started this program to be a trainer for students at the technical universities. And this program is organized by Google Romania. And I created the courses and the curricula for those classes. And this program is happening on 4 big cities from Romania, on 4 big technical universities. And I'm also the trainer in Bucharest. Usually the groups are about 30 people, and I help them to learn Android from scratch.
Oh, wow. You mentioned you took some maybe some courses on becoming a technical trainer, and your parents wanted you to be a teacher, and so you're making their wish happy, making them happy, I suppose. There, do you find that in your curriculum, so you're teaching people how to start developing Android applications from scratch. Do you get to dig into some of the topics related to like long-term best practices related to long-term, like now imagine like 3 years, you're still working on the same project. What sort of things can you put in place today that you're not going to be mad at yourself for in 3 years from now when you're still working on this project? How have you been able to incorporate long-term maintainability to someone that's trying to understand how it works in the first place?
Yeah, I will come back a little bit with the idea of how I became a trainer. My parents told me all the time that I will be a good teacher, a good trainer, because I'm able to explain in an easy way some difficult things. And I discovered lately that I have these skills. I was not aware about it. And right now I enjoy it a lot because I realize that sometimes when I'm able to explain a complex concept to someone, I'm able to understand it better. And it's also a way for me to learn new stuff and to be prepared to answer to their questions, even if they are my students, even if I'm going to a technical conference and I should prepare a specific topic and I should be able to answer the questions from the audience. And now coming back at your question, in my courses, in my classes with my students, I'm trying to emphasize the importance of the clean code. And I try to show them the difference between an unclean code and a clean code. And I start with basic and simple examples, like how to call a variable or how to call a function. And I try to explain them if I call a variable x, int x, equals 0. If I call it int count of students equals 0, the difference is huge, because if you will come back in 3 or 4 months there, you will understand what that variable will do. So I try also with this kind of clean code principles, and also I emphasize the importance of knowing the object-oriented principles, and they should know Java. I'm teaching the classes in Java. I hope I will do it also in Kotlin, but they are learning Java at the university, so this was the reason why I choose Java. And also I try to tell them from my stories and from my mistakes, and learn them to understand why, for example, it's important to define the strings in a file, all the strings in a file, because maybe at a moment the customer or the product owner will want to make the application multi-language, and in that moment, if you don't have all the strings in the same place, you'll need to get all the strings from the entire project in order to achieve that task. So I truly believe in this idea of understanding the why. Because if I told them just put the strings in the same file and that's it, let's move on, I don't think it's so clear, and they don't understand what is the purpose of doing like that. Why don't just put them in the Java code or in the XML layouts?
You touched on a couple of things there related to, as you're helping people understand and showing them good examples of maybe bad or lazy coding styles, like a single letter variable name it's like a really good example. And I'm remembering for my own experiences that I did that when I was, earlier in my career, and would be made fun of by my coworkers. So it was, it's helpful to see that kind of like those differences early on. Are they able to kind of get their head wrapped around unit testing in your training mechanism, or is that kind of something that you bring in later? Is TDD an approach that you feel like you can start off early on in someone's career, or is that something you kind of need to bring in a little later on?
Yeah, in my this program made by Google Romania, I split it in two parts. There is a course for fundamentals, and it's another one for advanced. In the fundamentals, we don't touch this subject of testing. This course takes 10 weeks, and in the first 9 weeks, I teach them different concepts. And in the final course, in the final class, they show their work, because during the classes, they work on a project. that combine all the concepts learned during the classes. So the time is too short to cover also the testing in the fundamentals, but in the advanced course, they cover the testing. Usually I try to, in order to somehow help them to move in that direction, is to think what could happen wrong. Okay, so I have here a getter. What will happen if the that object will be null? And somehow I try also to write the code in a defensive way somehow, but also to help them to go in the unhappy path approach.
So they kind of work through that. What about thinking a little bit more about like in these advanced topics, and something that I've touched on with a few different people on the podcast is I didn't go through I didn't really go through a formal education process to become a software developer myself. And I'm not someone that really enjoys working on brand new projects. I like making changes to existing projects. And I've always been curious how they're able to effectively teach people how to build a new thing, but also to dive into an existing code base. Because my guess is that most people in the industry, their first job isn't starting with a blank canvas project, greenfield project. You're diving into something that's been around for a couple of years, maybe more, and it's big and messy, and you're like, oh, wow, this is a completely different environment. I know how to build some scaffolding right now, but I don't know how to like change that. So how do you help people get through that process? Or is that part of the education curriculum of changing something that they didn't build themselves?
Not exactly. What I can tell you from my team lead experience, this part, the idea is that also in teaching and mentoring juniors or new people in your team, it's important to help them if they don't already know what is their learning style. Because by doing that, you are able to understand what kind of resources they will need in order to learn new skills or to help them to understand the legacy code. And by learning styles, I'm talking that about the fact that some people learn by doing. They are hands-on people, or some people are visual and they like to see schemas and I don't know, pictures with some representations and make everything visual. And there are some people that like and they learn better when they hear the information. So I think this is the first step to understand your way to learn new stuff. And after that, based on the profile and based on what you want to achieve, it's very helpful to help the team member or the student to create a learning plan. And I think this learning plan, when you have a mentor, could be done very easily because you should know what should be covered. I don't know, maybe first of all, it's important to know what is a class, an interface, what is inheritance, what is composition, what is the difference between them, basic stuff. And after that, you go to the language and you need to understand how to work with the language and what are the main features of it in order to help him to write code that is not doing over engineering. So do some fancy stuff that could be done, I don't know, with just a simple instruction. And this learning plan should be reviewed periodically in order to see what should be changed, what should be added, and so on. It's like a feedback loop here. And also, depending on the experience, I encourage them, for example, in my team, I encourage them to give technical talks inside of the team or to the other squads. For example, one of my team members is very good on the UI testing, automation testing. And I try to encourage him to do a presentation about this topic. Or if they could also mentor the juniors, and they, in this way, you give him some autonomy and you empower him or her to help another team member to learn new stuff. And sometimes you also are able to clarify some things because learning by learning others, it's a way to build new skills or to improve your own skills.
Definitely helps build up some confidence for people too in that process by knowing that you can communicate and explain things to other people. I think there's definitely some good advice in there. I'm curious about yourself. How do you approach continuously leveling up on your own skills?
Yeah, I must confess that I'm still striving to keep up with the technical stuff, but I'm also focused in the latest years on the leadership skills. So sometimes it's difficult. A way to make sure that I'm keeping up with the technical stuff is by reviewing the code and coaching my team members. Also by writing articles about some specific topics, maybe some new ones for me, or maybe some topics that are already known, but I found a new way to explain those things. And also the technical talks that I give at different conferences are very helpful for me in order to learn new things about a specific topic.
You mentioned the last few years you've been focusing more on leadership skills. So how has that transition from being maybe a regular daily contributor to producing code and knowing that, look, I did something and I immediately see if it's working or not, to is I can relate to this in a leadership role where you're experimenting with doing a lot of different things and you don't get that immediate feedback of like, I hope what the advice or the conversation I just had was helpful. How and knowing that you're kind of leaning on your team to deliver their parts of the project. And what has that process been like mentally for you to kind of transition to getting comfortable with not seeing code as your primary way of seeing that you accomplish something?
Yeah, indeed, it was difficult because I used to check some tasks at the end of the day, and it was very clear what I've done during that day. And by being a team lead, sometimes when you try to see what happened during the day, you see that you had some meetings, maybe some one-on-ones, and maybe you wrote some documentation, or if you're lucky enough, you made some code review in that day. Yeah, it was a little bit difficult, and I had some moments when I was not so sure that I want to go to the leadership or came back to the development. But I think the things that are happening right now in my career help me to keep also closer the technical things. I learn a lot of new stuff because right now in my team I have also backend developers, and I learn a lot of things from them and a lot of concepts and new frameworks and new libraries. And somehow I feel that I learn new stuff and it's very helpful for me. And on the other side, I do my best to learn more about how to work with people and how to help them to grow. And to a discovery that was very surprising for me was the fact that you are not able to motivate the people. I read a book by Susan Fowler, and in that book says that you are not able to motivate them, but you are able to create a context that will help them to succeed. And in that book, it's a concept of ARC, autonomy, relatedness, and competency. And you should focus on these three skills to be improved for your team members in order to create a context for them to succeed. It's a conscious work for me to understand their way to do the things, also to help them to learn to receive feedback and to give feedback. All the time make sure that they are happy with the things that are happening in the project. And yeah, sometimes I'm not able to make all the people happy, and I don't think also is my entire job. But I think I truly believe in the idea that I'm responsible to set up the people for success, and this success could be a different thing for each one of them.
Yes, that's very true. You can't apply the same approach on every person within your team as much as you wish you could. You're like, oh, I'll get really good at this, but then you get that other person. You're like, this is not working for them. I got to try something different, or I might need to go learn some new skills myself to figure out how to like navigate this.
Yeah, and I want to come back a little bit with the idea of motivating the people. Indeed, it's very helpful to have their feedback and to understand that we have a shared vision and a common purpose. And our purpose, in our case, is to build a product. And this common purpose should help the team to collaborate and to understand that they work on the same purpose and everybody has the same vision in their mind.
How do you go about assessing if that's actually true? Do you like whether that they do share the same vision, when I know that we all interpret words a little differently? Or
yeah, it was a little bit of work at the beginning. The product owners help us a lot with this shared vision because they showed us somehow what is the end purpose of our work, and also the opportunity to work on a product from scratch was very motivating for the team. And also the fact that they know they have the opportunity to choose some stuff or to improve the code by adding, I don't know, new libraries, or by we have somehow the ownership in a limited set of limits. For sure we have some limits, but we also have the opportunity to choose, and I think it's rewarding for the team.
no, I have a few final questions for you, and I wanted to thank you for opening up and sharing some of your own experiences, in particular around mentorship and leadership, and knowing you've got to go through those challenges. And I like having those conversations with people on the podcast in particular, with so that I know there's a lot of developers that think that there's like, oh, at some point I'll become a manager, but I don't know that they're always thinking about how different their job's going to be once they become like a lead of a team. And like, you're not just getting to make all the decisions of all the technical decisions. And like, it's not going to be like, oh, once I'm leading the team, we'll do things the right way. It's like, no, you can't take over those decisions away from the other people on the team. You got to give them the chance to make those decisions and learn and experiment with things. And managing and leading a team is, and I also really appreciate you also talking a little bit about how you can't motivate people. And I know that's always like a question. We're always like, how can I just encourage them or motivate them in just the right way? It's a complicated process that you have to kind of go through. So outside of, you mentioned Susan Fowler's book there, but outside of, say, that, what non-software development related book do you find yourself most often recommending to, say, people in your team to read?
I realize right now that lately I read only books in the technical field. I can recommend one that it's somehow technical but not fully technical. It's written by Venkat. It's called Practices of an Agile Developer. It's about how to collaborate and how to work in an agile world. And it's more about behaviors and best practices.
Nice. I'll definitely include a link to that in the show notes. And where can listeners best follow your thoughts on software development online?
Yes, you could find me on Twitter, Magda Miu. And also I have a blog with the same name. And yeah, so especially on Twitter, you could find me.
Well, excellent. Well, it's been such a delight having you on Maintainable, Magda. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was also very nice for me. Thank you.